Okay, awesome. So the recording started. So everybody, welcome to the fourth annual New Zealand Business Application Summit. I am super excited to actually be running this event today. It is sort of 9 a.m. here in New Zealand. We have rainy weather outside, which is perfect weather for a Saturday conference. So I'm really happy that the gods are with us from that perspective. And as San said earlier in the chat, let's hope the demo gods are on our side as well for the rest of the demos that we're going to have for the day. So let me quickly start by introducing myself. I am Rami. I am Wellington-based. I am the leader of the Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform user group here. I've been doing that for probably the good last 10 years. I'm one of the organizers. I'm joined by Richard Birds as well as Hamish Shield, the co-organizers of this session. So do you guys want to put yourself off mute and then maybe just say a couple of words?
Yep. Yeah, I'll beat you, Hamish. I was waiting to see if you came off mute. Hello, everybody. I'm Rich. I'm based in Christchurch, New Zealand, so I'm representing the South Island today, and really keen to hear Ryan and Samir and everybody else talking today. It's going to be awesome. So thanks for coming along. Remember, there's different teams meetings for each of the streams that are happening today, so make sure you jump between the different ones as you go through the day.
Cool, thanks, Rich. Hi, everyone. I'm Hamish. I'm based in Auckland and run the Auckland user group. So yeah, Rich and Ryan and myself usually team up for these sorts of events. But thanks for joining us today. And I'm glad it's been raining because the whole week in Auckland it's been beautiful and the beaches have been packed. So it's great to see that we can have an excuse to stay inside today. And thanks to all the speakers. It's I think we've got over 36 speakers today. So it's it's a big effort, and there's a range of topics across the Power Platform dynamics. So pretty impressive. So thanks everyone for participating and looking forward to a great day.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Hamish. We'll come to the keynote speakers shortly. We've got some sort of a really exciting lineup, but let's quickly go through first. So as I mentioned, this is the fourth time that we're doing this annual conference. It's the largest Power Platform and Dynamics 365 conference in New Zealand. This year, given that we're doing all three cities at the same time, it is a virtual event. We've got 5 tracks running in parallel, 30 sessions, 33 speakers, and 14 of those are MVPs. So we're packed with a lot of really, really awesome sessions. It's perfect timing to do it in November because we just sort of finished Ignite last week, and then we had tons and tons of information that came out of this conference. We were sharing, we even did sort of some sessions internally. So, you know, if you missed out on some of the highlights, there's a recording of the after party that we did sort of across New Zealand. We had Neil Benson, who's on the call as well, join us from Australia. We had Chris Cognetta from the US, and the beautiful sort of local MVPs that also joined us in New Zealand. So yeah, we had some fun talking about those latest and greatest. So let me quickly walk you through the different sort of streams that we're going to have during the day. As sort of Hamish and Richard were sort of highlighting, each stream will have its own sort of link. On the main sort of page, there will be a on the main event sort of stream, there'll be a link to those all different streams, or you can go on to Sessionize and have a look at what is the stream URL so you can join it. The first one is the customer success that will sort of talk about, you know, our specific customers in New Zealand. Good examples are NZTE and Sealord Westpac, talking about their experience, their journey using the Power Platform, and, you know, their adoption story behind it. We've got a dedicated Dynamics 365 stream that will be sort of covering those first-party apps, those first-party modules, customer service, marketing, and so on. Some really, really exciting content to have a look in here. If you're more on the Power Platform, there's a dedicated stream for Power Apps and virtual agents, sort of talking about, you know, how to implement them, best practices, and things to look for. There's also a Power BI and governance session. Being in Wellington, I'm really interested in governance, being that it's the political capital of New Zealand. So there's quite a lot of really interesting topics in there if you want to sort of get up to speed with some of those capabilities. And last and not least, Power Automate and Dynamics 365. So in here, we'll, again, if you like to get your hands dirty, talk a little about sort of RPA and PVA and some of the other sort of capabilities within the Power Platform. With that, if you want to stay till the end, we've got our sort of final session at 5 o'clock, where Dicker Data, our sponsor, is going to give away a couple of Surface headphones. Rich, want to talk a little bit about sort of how we're going to do the draw at the end of the day?
Yep, I can cover that off. So we're doing a live spinning Wheel of Fortune. So you need to register your, if you want to win anything, you got to use the Microsoft form, which will post up a QR code to join. Put your name, your email in there, and then we will do, I think I can get about 30 people on each spinning wheel. So we'll have like rounds. And if you make it through, then we'll move your name, and we'll basically at the end of the session, we'll get down to the last 30 and then spin it. And then we'll go to the top 2 winners. And they'll get the prizes. So it should be fun, but make sure you sign up for it. It's going to be fun.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Thank you very much for that, Rich. I'm looking forward to sort of the prize giving as well, but also for all the sessions. Now, one thing to note, those are team meetings, so we don't have any restrictions about who can talk or sort of who can share, but please follow the etiquette. So if you have a question, raise your hand. For each session, there'll be an MC that is looking at the chat as well as looking at sort of any emotion. So if someone raises their hand, then we can go and have a quick sort of interruption and ask the question. And just make sure that you're muted during the session so that we don't hear background noise and sort of distract the speakers. So one of the themes that we've seen at Ignite is the sort of collaboration. And I think this is a natural progression coming from the COVID situation where lots of people are sort of in lockdown doing those sessions remotely, but they're using the Power Platform and Dynamics 365 really heavily. And that collaboration has never been sort of more intense, especially in the virtual world, rather than being sort of in the office and tapping into someone's shoulder and asking them a question. So we've seen a lot of really cool features that have been introduced in the platform to support in that space. And we'll be talking about a few of those sort of during the conference. But next, I would really, I'm super excited to be sort of introducing the keynote speakers for today. I feel like I am a little kid going to a rock concert and meeting sort of the rock gods at the concert. So we've got Ryan Cunningham joining us. He is the product lead of the Microsoft sort of Power Apps. Really excited to have him here. I'm so happy that he's joining us from his attic, his iconic attic that he talked about all the time. And we've seen him present from that attic for many, many times. So it's sort of like it completes the picture and then shares it with the New Zealand population and whoever else is watching us across the world. The second keynote is Samir Bangar. He is a principal program manager from the CAT team, so the Customer Advisory team. And here's just sort of some of the sort of latest and greatest that they've been working on. So without further ado, I'm really happy to hand over to you guys and sort of to ignite that session and sort of excite the conference. Over to you guys.
All right. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you for the probably excessive intro and just the opportunity to be here with you today. You know, we in many ways you know, feel exactly the same way. You know, and I say that really genuinely. I think the mark of a healthy product is not only how many people use it every week or what the rating in the App Store is. It's really how many people are willing to spend a Saturday talking about it with each other, you know, and I think and build a community around it. And so it's a huge honor to be part of that movement and to be able to spend some time with y'all. So thank you for that. Let me try to do the most technically challenging part of the day, which is share my screen effectively. Let's see if that works. You know, if y'all can see that.
We can see it.
Cool. I will say you're all in the future for us. We're still stuck in Friday in the middle of the day, so hopefully the future is bright on your part of the world. Okay, so look, I'll spend a little bit of time. I think there's going to be a lot of great specific technical content today, and I will try not to steal any of that thunder, but kind of zoom way out and just give an update on how we're thinking about the state of low code and the state of Power Platform and biz apps in general, and tell a couple of examples along that line. And then Samir, who sort of represents in many ways the soul of Power Platform, really the soul of the community, and brings a lot of people together, will help share some even more detailed stories about that. We'll kind of pass off, but hopefully that'll be a good backdrop to sort of what's coming next. Folks who know me know that I love to start at stories, and so I've got one today, sort of inspired in some ways by this group. This is a photo from about 1.5 years ago. This is the front line of COVID defense in Jersey, and by that I do not mean the U.S. state of New Jersey. I mean perhaps you could call it Old Jersey or Original Jersey. This is the tiny island in the English Channel between England and France. So from one island nation to another, we bring this story of Power Platform. But the island of Jersey is actually not a very large place. It's much smaller than either of the islands represented here. Only about 100,000 people live on this island full time, but it's the type of place that the population typically doubles or triples in a tourist season, and very tourist dependent economy because of that. If you talk to Gary, who is the head of IT in what is effectively a pretty small local government organization, the decision about whether and how to let travelers into the island in the summer of 2020 was just one that traditionally had no good answers. You can't get that wrong on either side. You stay locked down, and you really risk the livelihood of the island. You open up too broadly, you really risk the livelihood of the island. And this team was given about 6 weeks to make that decision by the ferry operators and airlines, who going into the summer of 2020 basically said, we're going to start traveling again. Are you going to open your ports? And if so, how? And that was not a lot of time to react. And so a lot of decisions had to get made, and a lot of things had to get built, and some of those things were technology. And we helped. We put in place a small team of Microsoft experts, just 3 or 4 people who knew their way around Power Platform, to really jump in and work around the clock with some experts in Gary's team and in the government of Jersey, and come up with a solution that was very sweeping end to end. I mean, it started with a Power portal that any traveler could visit, attest to their health history and their background. They got sent via Power Automate a QR code that then they scanned with the Power app on a mobile device of a frontline worker when they arrive. Most people come by passenger and car ferry. That securely transferred all the information. Nobody had to touch a piece of paper or a pen or fill out a form. That same mobile Power app then barcode scanned a test kit. Join was made in Dataverse in the back end. All of the downstream reporting was automated via Power BI and Power Automate for notifications. Dynamics 365 applications were used in this solution for contact tracing, sort of an adaptation of that customer service offering. That whole thing was sort of built end to end to manage this process. And those of us, who have built software before in other contexts, can look at something like this and have a couple reactions. One, it's not very remarkable that software could build these things. But what's remarkable is really time. I think a lot of us can imagine how long it might traditionally take if we were a consultant or a product manager trying to put together this thing end to end. We can imagine the fact-finding missions. We can imagine the Gantt charts that we might create, the schedules, the requirements document, the round of revisions. I mean, gosh, just alone that portal to capture personal health information from public citizens in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of Brexit, with GDPR and EU restrictions, that alone, incredibly intimidating task. Let alone multiple mobile devices for frontline workers, multiple BI dashboards, backend applications, workflow automation. That entire package was a proof of concept in 4 days and shipped into production 2 weeks after that. It was ready for the first boat. And it has, processed hundreds of thousands of travelers through this set of ports, and Jersey benefits from being a small island, but maintained one of the lowest incident rates and highest testing rates of COVID throughout the entire pandemic. And you fast forward, a year on or more, a whole large chunk of the population around the world is getting their vaccine shot processed end to end on Power Platform. This is a picture from Lumen Field here in Seattle, where I got my shot, and frontline worker, with a Power App at the door, Power Apps running on devices, at the central desk, a professionally developed website over Dataverse APIs and Power Portal's backend, scheduling those appointments in the first place. So just really interesting impact of how quickly the world has changed and reacted to a lot of these challenges that nobody knew we were going to have a few months ago or a few years ago, and being able to take a pretty robust set of tools and a robust set of expertise and apply that quickly has just been a huge pressure test of the promise of low code. And that's happened, in every sector, not just public health. I think a lot of people have realized over the last couple of years that this whole digital transformation thing is not just something that's fun to talk about at a conference, as a someday thing. This is a right now thing, and this is no longer a nice to have. And it's not always going to be a beautiful, elegant process. It's not always going to be easy, but it's no longer optional. And just a lot of organizations, both in the public sector, in the private sector, in the nonprofit sector, organizations at very large scale and at very small scale, have to really rethink what they're doing at every level, and particularly down into the long tail. And we've been having this sort of conversation with ourselves as a technology industry for a long time. That there's this big developer shortfall coming, and that there's way more apps we have to build than we have available, and all of that has been just exacerbated in the last 18 months. But the truth is until low code, we didn't really have a good answer for this, as an economy. I mean, our best answer for this was, well, figure it out. Pull out an Excel spreadsheet, make an access database, do your best. When there was a gap between technology and what humans needed it to do, and that sort of crucible is really what's driving low code. If you believe Gartner, of all the pieces of technology on the landscape right now, low code is the one that Gartner is saying everybody needs to go make a plan for now, figure out now. And of all the low code offerings, particularly for the enterprise, Power Platform is really up and to the right, and has gotten there very rapidly compared to a lot of the other names on this list. And we're seeing, even Gartner admits that Power Platform is by far the most adopted of those options. We're seeing global organizations, really go big on this platform, not for one thing or a few things, but in most of cases for these companies and many others, thousands of applications built by hundreds, or in some cases thousands of people, rolled out to tens of thousands of users, really making a difference at scale. I know everybody here tunes in closely to Microsoft quarterly earnings calls, but actually Satya in just the last one this month said, that basically we really definitively now believe that Power Platform is clearly, specifically Power Apps, clearly the market leader in low code, no code tools. There are, not to be diminutive, but more people used a Power App in the last 28 days, more than twice as many people used a Power App in the last 28 days than the population of New Zealand. There's now more than 10 million monthly active users in a month, and much larger if you look at people that use over the course of a quarter. And in some of those organizations, just big penetration in the Fortune 500 at really large scale. The number of organizations that have 10,000 users, there are actually organizations that have more than 100,000 users of Power Apps just within one company, and that's really accelerating very fast. So, I mean, I think the headline here is we're part of something big, and this group gathered here is part of a movement that is clearly taking off at exponential scale. But actually, the reason why I put this slide on the screen right now, and this number on the screen, is actually not to go thump our chests and say that we've become victorious in something. 10 million is a tiny number. it is really small compared to the number of humans with smartphones and jobs, let alone the number of humans on the planet that, you know, might need to be served by a public health crisis, or you know, or interacting with their financial institution, or walking through an airport, you know, on a daily basis, right? And so the opportunity here is still massive, and what we've done so far as a community and as a set of products is prove that it's viable. But we are just in the early days. We're at day zero of really going and showing what this can do at huge scale in the world. And that's true for us. We got to stay real humble in the product and the engineering team. We got a lot more stuff to build and a lot more stuff to make better. But it's also true for the opportunity in this community. You know, the skills you're building right now and the framework you're putting down is something that really will change the face of how organizations innovate for the next 10 or 20 years. And that's very much how we are investing in it and thinking about it. And so when we think about that future, you know, it is important to kind of contemplate what next. You know, what is it going to take to continue this pace of exponential growth over the next 100 million humans or billion humans, and not just the first 10? You know, I would say that the hardest part of what lays ahead of us, and the most compelling part to me about low code, is not what we do to shorten cycles of technology. And yes, that's really important. You know, a solution in Jersey comes together and you can build all those things in 4 days because you're not starting from scratch. You know, because there already is a planet scale relational database that's GDPR compliant and geo-resident in multiple places that I can stamp out with a click of a button and start building things on top and not have to build from scratch. That's important, but it's not the biggest part. I would say the most important part of this is people. You know, what makes software slow is humans. And it's the fact that we have this human gap of expertise between what it takes to build a geo-resident HIPAA compliant database in the middle of GDPR, and what it takes to actually flow humans through a port of entry in a place like Jersey. And oftentimes the people with those two types of expertise are miles apart from each other, you know, literally and culturally and figuratively. You know, it's something, you know, for me coming into this place, you know, in space, and even coming into Microsoft 6 or 7 years ago with a very different background than a typical Microsoft product person. You know, I got asked this question a lot that I just didn't understand at first. Are you technical? You know, like that's a binary state that you can either be technical or non-technical, and there's nothing in between. Or there's a version of this question that's even worse, which is, how technical are you? Like, I don't know, 7? Like, how do you even answer that? But I think a lot of us who have spent time in technology have really built up this sort of myopic understanding that there is technical expertise and there is nothing else, and that the world needs more technical expertise. That the answer to all these problems is just, we need more technical people and more technologists. And in fact, like as an industry, we've spent a long time having a conversation about, well, gosh, we've got to teach everybody to code. You know, we've got to go put a coding boot camp in every you know, grade school classroom, and then we've got to take that all the way through colleges and universities. And look, we've made some progress there, but not nearly enough. I mean, if you look at the actual data on how many people can write .NET or C# or JavaScript, it is still several orders of magnitude less than the number of humans who are familiar with a spreadsheet. And at some level, you know, that's okay, and that's actually probably the right thing. You know, we still need doctors and medical experts and mechanical engineers and airline operators. We can't actually make everybody a computer scientist. That is just kind of silly at scale, right? And so the real answer to this is, how do you actually get everybody to bring their own expertise? You know, how do you take that expertise in a business, in a field, in an area of operation, and get somebody to bring it to the table and be able to solve more interesting problems and more challenging problems with that expertise, not in spite of that expertise. You know, and so, you know, that's the real expertise gap in my mind. You know, we have people with expertise in technology and people with expertise in real life, and in traditional technology worlds, the only way to bridge that expertise is really expensive process. Like this is the stuff that takes lots of time and energy to extract the expertise out of the head of somebody who lives in a port of entry and put it into the head of a software developer and hope that something good comes out the other side. And that's just not a strategy that works for a lot of these things. And that's why a lot of this software is not getting built. People ask me, especially people who come from a technology background, like, Ryan, what the heck is a citizen developer? Like, I've never met anybody that says I am a citizen developer. And my best answer to that is just a citizen developer is somebody with a real job. That wants to make it better, not somebody that sits around all day making software. And so that is really the core thesis of low code and power platform in my mind is, how do we actually start to bring these types of expertise closer together? Not disclude one group for the other, but really actually redefine how they work together. And create a common playing field where we can cut out some of all that inefficient stuff in the middle and get people actually on the same page. We talk a lot internally about low code as a team sport. That when it's running most efficiently, it takes people from all of these disciplines, people with expertise in a business or an area of operation, people with expertise in software, and people with expertise to keep us all safe and compliant and on track, working together and in very practical ways, figuring out how to work together differently and work together better. That is the common thread that has really run through a lot of the innovation we've invested in so far, and a lot of the big scaled success stories of Power Platform that we've seen in the world. And you're absolutely spot on to recognize a lot of the innovation that continues to come out and the things we're investing in going forward, including a lot of the things we just talked about at Ignite, are really directly related at some level to this interplay and this interaction. Some of it very literally. We've finally taken steps to make it easier to co-author applications and bring this collaboration directly into the authoring environment. I can leave a comment and @mention somebody as I'm building an app. We're finally taking steps to make it a lot easier for professionals who want to do source control and back their applications in Git to be able to have a back and forth that is addressable and monitorable and know what changed as they go. And we're also extending that not just to people building apps, but also people using them. The ability to bring co-presence and live chat directly into the runtime of an application as I'm running it. Both Dynamics 365 apps and custom Power Apps is just a huge step forward to make what is traditionally a very isolated experience. I'm going to enter my leads into the CRM system, actually much more of a multiplayer experience. We are going to go close this deal. And that's these are the places where sometimes small features actually make a big step change in how people think about technology and how they interact with it by bringing the rest of the organization in line and inside. And then some of the other stuff we disclosed, the ability to then take all that and inject it where people are actually working in Office 365, in their email, in their Teams chat, the ability to sort of take the whole company and activate them with data and information and workflow where they're already working, not have to invite them into a business application is really key. And so there's a big vision here that we lined out of what's coming over the next year that will all be incremental, but will really ladder up to this idea that the world of productivity and the world of business should no longer be separate, and we should really be able to blur those lines in a really fundamental way. Even to shift gears, some of the investments we're doing around more advanced stuff like AI is all targeted at getting people closer to that middle. How do I make it easier for somebody to just express a name concatenation or string manipulation or date formatting? Those are things that are all actually pretty complicated in Power Apps today, or any other programming language. How do I take things like PROSE, which is called programming by example, or GPT-3, a natural language model, and just start to really lower the cost, the sort of cognitive cost of expressing some of those concepts, so that more people can bring their expertise, so that more people can participate. And so the exciting part to me, though, is not just all the new stuff that's shipping. It's the way that people are already implementing it and are already working. And I think we're starting to see that crop up in really interesting ways around the world and in places that you might not expect to be sort of on the forefront of innovation of technology. One of the stories I love that's relatively recent is from a regional heavy equipment dealer in the U.S., Western States Caterpillar. I don't know who has recently rented a backhoe or a bulldozer, but if you have and you were in Ohio, you would work with these guys. And what's interesting about that is, they have a team of professionals, a small team of professional developers with backgrounds in both front end and back end software development and business intelligence, who they've trained up on Power Platform, and they deploy as a unit in a very different way than you would traditionally deploy software developers. They've got a great story, and it's public, about basically setting up shop in a heavy equipment repair dealership for a week and building an application right there. Literally sitting next to the humans that are going to use it, iterating in real time, taking all that people process that you would have been, previously a research project, and turning those people into research subjects and really turning them into colleagues and building right along with them. And being able to sort of iterate in real time, change the design in real time. It's just a massive compression of time to market, time to value, and impact for a team like this. Another story that I love at scale is, and this is something we're seeing across lots of organizations, but even H&M, fashion retailer, globally operating, has a whole initiative to go upskill people at every part of their business and get them hands-on with Power Platform. And they have thousands of apps that have been built by hundreds of people, and they have a segmentation strategy for how they think about what gets built in a productivity context and what's a more critical application that needs hands-on professionals. We're even seeing organizations kind of take a further step and start to build businesses on Power Platform. EY, a big organization in a lot of the parts of the world, building repeatable solutions that are very targeted to niche scenarios and then rolling them out at customer over customer really quickly. This one sort of built in response to some of the U.S. government stimulus around COVID for small businesses, a solution for banks to be able to effectively vet and then forgive debt as part of this government program. Very complicated thing to built in the space of a few months and rolled out to dozens of their customers, collectively forgiving tens of billions of dollars of debt on Power Platform. And again, those are just the type of thing that being able to sort of compress those time cycles has been really, really crucial. But the last thing I'll share, and maybe this is repeat for some folks who have been in the community for a while, and I apologize if it is, but the real stories behind all of these, again, are not the architecture or the business. It's the humans. And I think what gets people excited, what gets people to things like this on a Saturday morning is the same thing that we will see replicate over and over and over again. And so this story is one of the ones that's near and dear to my heart, and I'll share it with you in 90 seconds.
My name is Foyi Olajide Bello. I work with Sterling Bank PLC here in Nigeria. The first app I built came about from the request of a business user saying, we would like to put this Excel sheet on OneDrive. And I said, what we need to do is we need to build an app for this. And I built my first app using Power Apps. After that, people got to hear about the app and how quickly it was done. I'm like, oh, Foyi, I would like to build an app. So I thought to myself, why should I upskill myself alone? And why should every other person not know how to do this themselves? So I thought about the idea of Citizen Developer Academy. So the user group, we started with 2, and we started to grow in that way, and we're currently 1,200. And when they learn, they get so inspired, and they go back to their communities, they go back to their schools to start up local user groups there. So we'll have events, and most of the speakers will be male. That was what started out Textilers. We're currently over 300 women, all passionate about helping and supporting each other, using our knowledge in the Power Platform. For me, the Power Platform is not just another tool. It's actually a transformational agent. And I believe strongly that if we all get into this revolution, we'll get to a point where our whole country, Nigeria, will be totally transformed.
Cameo of some familiar faces in that one. That video was made almost 2 years ago. And this stuff catches fire, and I think what everybody here is part of is something very, very, very big. And the ability to sort of be part of that and to give back as part of that and create that that sort of energy in others around you is the most exciting part of all of this for me. So my big message is a very sincere thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're creating in the world. Thank you for the feedback and the way that you help make the product better with us actively. And most importantly, thanks for the time today. So I'll stop there. Happy to hang out for the rest of the session and take any questions, but I want to make sure that Samir gets some time here as well. So I'll cede the screen.
Thank you very much, Ryan. That was a very nice introduction, and I definitely can relate to everything that you said in here, especially around sort of the upskilling side of things. In New Zealand, after the COVID situation, our borders are closed. We can't get any talent to the country, and as you mentioned, more people, like twice the size of the population of New Zealand, are using the Power Platform. So we don't have the right resources in New Zealand. In fact, I believe we probably have the highest per capita number of MVPs. And probably the highest concentration in my neighborhood. Eliza and Lynn are basically my neighbors. I can just wave and see them out the window. But that means that we do not have enough people actually working on those applications, and we are using them for big projects. And a good example is sort of managed isolation and quarantine, so MIQ, for people coming in from overseas and having to sort of isolate. This is using the Power Platform actually behind the scenes, and I know the people that are working on it. But with absolute shortage of skills, the best way is to upskill and to get those communities together, and then sort of to get people to start working together, understanding how the Power Platform, and even like, changing disciplines from maybe having a pure functional consultant or pure BA into becoming a functional consultant from, a different product such as, I don't know, Lotus Notes or Java into more of a sort of Power Platform sort of focus, given how easy it is to build things. And some of the demos we're going to be showing today, like, minutes, and then you have something absolutely amazing sort of up and running. So thank you very much for this really, really awesome introduction. Samir, I'll hand over to you, and then maybe at the end, we'll just ask a few questions.
Cool. Sure, absolutely. I'm going to just keep emphasizing what Ryan just said, because I do agree it's all about the people and the humans. Kia ora, New Zealand. I think hopefully I got that right. That's what Eliza prompted me. So thanks for that. Can people see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So I will. Hello, my name is Samir, and I'm on what we call the Power Cat team. So it's the customer advisory team for many of the Power Platform products. I get part of my job somehow is I've become a citizen storyteller, and I get to share some of these stories and curate them, create, curate, share, I suppose. And so today what I'll spend some time on is some of my own experience and a bit of actually something we haven't really shared the backstory on some of these things more publicly. So I'll talk a bit about that and then share some examples of stories, maybe double click a little bit more into a couple of examples that Ryan shared. With that, and let me see if my clicker here is working. Okay. Before I jump into stories, few things, three sort of seeds that I'd love to plant, which hopefully after hearing Ryan start, and I'm just going to keep building on it. I think one is, stories matter, because I think that's what really brings the technology, the people, the business, all of that together is in some of these stories and how they're actually used. So that's one. Number two, I would say, look for stories that speak to you, right? There'll be many stories out there. I'll share some. We'll share some more examples at the end. But hopefully through that, you're looking at not every story is going to speak to everyone. You're going and looking for your story, and hopefully there is at least one that speaks to you. And the third and most important, I'll keep that at the end, and maybe we can close with that. So starting with a little story, once upon a time in 2018, Power Apps did not have a space in it. And there was this thing called Microsoft Flow, which was not yet Power Automate. And there was a conference coming up called Ignite about 3 weeks or so away. And we were wondering what do we do? We're Power Apps, Power Platform. I don't even know if Power Platform was a thing back then, but Power Apps was certainly a small fish in this big ocean of SharePoint, Office, Azure. And so what do we do, right? And what we felt we had was these fans, and I'll probably have to use a new word called rock stars now, thanks to Rami, is there are these rock stars in the community and fans of the product doing some amazing work. So there was a gentleman by the name of Ryan Cunningham, who you may have heard from recently. He came up with this idea: what if we became fans of our fans, right? What would that mean? What if we celebrate their stories and make them the rock stars of the show? And if I look out, we knew people like, and I'll shout out to Vanessa. Vanessa was in South Africa and is now moved to New Zealand. She was in Standard Bank, and we learned about her story, of how she had started creating a center of excellence in the bank with this idea of apps built by the business for the business. And that's a lot of what they were driving ahead on. Vanessa is now at Westpac Bank in New Zealand. So hello, Vanessa. And some of the other stories here, Nick was a trainer at the Red Cross. His career has moved on a fair bit. So we went down this and looked at this list and said, what do we do? There is some people talked about cricket. I used to play on the Microsoft cricket team. In the US, there are these things called baseball cards that I learned about. So we're like, what if we kind of turn these into some cards to go and share and tell these stories? And it really was our way of becoming fans of our fans. And so we did that at Ignite. And then it grew on. We learned more stories. Ryan shared Foyin's story, but as we got to Embass the next year, we learned about Derek, who was a bricklayer before he joined Nestle Waters, where he was working on the line and then created an app, highly customized Power App, which looked exactly like the paper that they used to manage all of their safety checks and tag things on the machine. And he had an app that looked exactly like that, which was usable by the folks on the floor. We learned about Lauren Taylor's story as a principal of a school. She was building apps for her students and teachers. We learned about Tyne, who's from Blackmores in Australia, who was more on the pro dev side of things. And he had his team of pro developers, business analysts, sort of partnering together and scaling up, taking all of their Dynamics 365 knowledge and taking a step further with the Power Platform. So we could spend, we'd probably end up using up your entire conference if we were to go through all of these. So I'll keep skipping ahead. But one thing that was fairly meaningful for me was you never know where things land up when you start doing something. And I certainly didn't expect this, but Eric McKinney was presenting in a keynote, demoing again with this gentleman called Ryan Cunningham. And the evening before, he handed a deck of these cards to Satya. And at the keynote, Satya ended up highlighting some of these stories and bringing that out. And it was a signed card from Eric. I saw it playing and I took out my phone, and this is a little, the audio won't come through well. It's a highly selfie type of video. There is a link there, that's the original. But Satya brought out these cards and started talking about these champ cards, right? And while he was doing that, my daughter over there, and you could see she probably saw I was excited, she went out and got Eric's card and put it in front. So it was kind of a fun experience to see that being shared. And for me, in some ways, what I got was a sense of what it's like and what it feels like to be a citizen maker, right, in some ways. So what did I learn as being a citizen maker of baseball cards? I felt like I understood the vision. And when I say I here, just to be super clear, this was not just me, right? It was me, folks like Brian Dang and others working in between meetings and our day jobs to put things like this together. But in terms of these were some of my reflections, right? I felt like I understood the vision. I cared about the people and the output. I was willing to jump in, learn, and experiment. I almost sent Ryan a mail saying, we're not going to do this thing. There's not enough time, but I'm glad we persevered. I felt like I created something. I collaborated with some professionals. We certainly had help from our design team. I shared, and it did feel meaningful, and it enabled a human connection, right? And if I reflect back on the stories that Ryan shared that you'll hear later on, not just from me, but from others in this conference. And when you read more stories, it really ends up being quite similar, right? They have a vision, people, they care, they're willing to go and learn and experiment. You go create something, you collaborate both in the product, in the process of making it, as well as with the broader community. And then you go out and share what you've created. And I certainly encourage you to do that. And hopefully it feels meaningful and enables an increase, I suppose, in human connection. Right. So with that backdrop, let me jump into a few examples in a few minutes we have here. So one that I really enjoyed hearing about, again, this is during the pandemic time, was Andrea from the United Kingdom. So she ran a one-woman clinic, and her clinic would not be able to continue on because of the COVID health protocols required. The way she was managing her notes and work and all of her patient information was either in her head or phone calls that she was making back and forth. And some people from Microsoft and the community, Taiki from our team, helped her out and built this solution in a really short period of time, right? And that solution was essentially using Microsoft 365 Power Platform along with Dataverse as the backend to put together this this end-to-end where there's a booking site, there are forms, her patients can come in and use that. All of it is cataloged. She can meet the health protocol requirement, the reporting requirements. And then on the back end, she has a model-driven app to manage her appointments, right? And I loved her quote when she ended up kind of sharing this story out, and particularly one aspect of it where she said she's really a private person. She wouldn't usually be sharing these things, but I liked where she said, it's not just I'm sorted now, but a question of could this save another little business? And that is the ethos of what I've come to understand the Power Platform is all about. So that was quite encouraging to see. Another one, I'm going to go, so it's a little bit back in time. You heard from Ryan on the COVID-19 example in Seattle at Lumen Field. Just prior to that, that solution was actually built for flu vaccinations being delivered by Seattle Visiting Nurses Association by Signetic, right? And so they had, again, this problem where their flu vaccinations had to go from being managed all on paper all of a sudden to these mobile clinics, and very quickly they had to turn around and make all of that digital. They already had an existing front-end website, and they ended up connecting to Dataverse through APIs with Canvas apps on the back end. And very quickly, in a matter of weeks, they were able to go to these mobile pop-up sort of clinics for flu vaccines. This solution essentially then became the footprint and the precursor to the COVID-19 solution that you saw there. And it's using the Dataverse SDK to be able to get data into Dataverse. They used some of the healthcare accelerator models. And then, as Ryan showed, you have Canvas apps for the front end, model-driven apps for the back end, and Power Automate orchestrating some flows. This is an older example. I thought I'm presenting the crowd here, and Rich and I had collaborated on this. It was fun to see. Environment Canterbury had developed this. It's a pretty, the thing that I like as a general model, there's just so many of these, right? You've got these super complex spreadsheets, many of them that take a while, they keep going around, take a while to cobble together, and things that ideally people would want at their fingertips are taking weeks to compile, right? And the solution was, again, it's a front-end Power App. In this case, one thing that was really neat is how the different screens, outcomes being in yellow and the different types, milestones being a certain color, instantly you could tell where you're at. And then you have flows running on the back end and Power BI reports. So it's seeing that pattern over and over again, continue to be used to then take what were those Excel spreadsheets and make that information really show up at one's fingertips has been interesting to see how common that is. The other one, again, close by, Australia, we learned about this recently, is the Hearing Australia app. This is where Jackie was an audiologist, and she really understood the pain of people on the ground and what they needed. And so she took it on herself to build this solution for the community organizers when they're out in the field doing their work. The one interesting nugget here, it's probably one of the early citizen developer stories, I would say, that certainly I've heard, is where she started with a model-driven app and started with Dataverse, and in fact even said, I don't know why people build these Canvas apps. You know, I like model-driven apps so much. I don't know if, Ryan, you want to hear that, but then
I love it.
It was fun to see the other side of it, because we do sometimes hear people, you know, more on the Canvas world when it comes to citizen development. So I think rounding that off was great to see. Again, you know, the architecture is pretty similar in terms of what's going on, and then behind the scenes, really awesome example of that fusion team working together. You know, Jackie knew exactly what she needed, but she did need help to integrate, especially on the data model side of things. And that's where she worked closely with the pro dev Umar on their team to bring those both together. If we had more time, I would play a recent video that we had put together on that, but you could go see it. There are some links below. Moving on, Ryan talked about Western States CAT. Here's a little snapshot of pictures of what it actually looks like, right? And they're on the ground, partnering with people to build these apps, but they're not just testing out, right? At least in the old days would be, I'm just testing. They're actually updating the app in real time, probably while out on that in the truck with the individual. Chris was the pro dev behind this, and he talked about how he got pestered enough by Justin Bailey, who was both the citizen developer and the leader of their division, and how he got pestered into starting to adopt low code, and he sort of never looked back since then. And they're connecting using Swagger and custom connectors to a bunch of backends. One of the, you know, the more newer products and in the Power Platform suite is Power Virtual Agents. This is a story from WestJet Airlines, where they built a Romeo chatbot, which is now being used across the company to handle all of these common HR queries that they get in. And that's, again, accessible. They've integrated in SharePoint, in Teams, on mobile apps. So it's really bringing the chatbot to where their users are and saving a ton of hours every week. Closer to, and I'm just going through these at a fairly rapid clip. I'll be putting links on so you can go read details on these on your own. Telstra. So these are some of my favorite stories where it starts, and I'll start with Nathan's journey, right? Where Nathan started as a communications technician, and then his kind of career evolved. He adopted more of, you know, Power Apps, built solutions, and then went on to really set up and help set up their COE and build something what they call their Power Factory, where he's now not just building solutions, but also the product owner of that Power Factory. From the solution side, he ended up taking about 70 different tools that was, you know, that technicians had to use and find in different ways, and consolidated that into 2 apps, one for their leaders on the field and one for the technicians. And this was also super useful when you have things like whether it's COVID-19 or other outbreaks, because what they did was leaders now were able to send videos, I believe, through Stream immediately in here. So they were able to get updates that they wanted within that same framework that was set up. This was their, you know, next evolution was taking this across to more folks in the organization and really building up the center of excellence, which includes a community aspect, an element of communications, and constantly sharing stories. It's been fun to hear about his Power News stories that he keeps sending out, and then also having a process into how do you actually manage it from an operations and pipeline perspective. So, you know, the common theme, I would say, across all of these center of excellence stories, or some of them like H&M and Chevron that call it their center for enablement. And we've had conversations when they said, you know, Samir, I don't know why you guys call it center of excellence. I think center for enablement is a better word for that. And they have the idea of wanting to unleash that creativity and innovation, at the same time wanting to do it with the right governance and guardrails. Right, and the combination of both those coming together, we keep seeing that. Again, it was something where I would say Standard Bank, we saw that early on with Vanessa and team, and it's been just great to see more and more of those patterns continue to emerge. So with that, as I'm kind of coming to a close over here, I'll share with you, if you go to AKMS Power Platform Stories, it's where we've curated a number of these stories. So, in between your sessions today, or when you're multitasking during your sessions, this might be a good place to go check out. You might find something, interesting that strikes for you. These things are sorted by the stories, and then these sort of indexes at the bottom that show you more curated links. And then there's the people behind it, right? And it's really, organizations are really abstract entities at one level, in my view. So it's really the people that make it happen. And so you could go learn about Rebecca from Custom Air Products, Foyin's story, Brian Hodel, pro dev at T-Mobile, Klaas, who was managing the H&M COE efforts, Alan and Georgia from Schlumberger and all the great work they've done there. And that list, it's got about 30 or so that we'll keep, cycling through over time. With that, as I'm coming to a close, I said stories matter. Hopefully in these you'll see some story that speaks to you. And the third one, which many of you may have already guessed, but somewhat cliche, is, but I do truly believe this is true, is I think the most important story is your story, right? So hopefully through this time, you're going to create some new stories. When you do so, come back and share it with us. We'd love to have Ryan and me having your slides over here, and have you as part of these. So with that, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Thanks again for having me over here. Hopefully you get to do all of this making, creating, collaborating, sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Samir. Really, really nice stories in here. We've got 4 minutes left, and I've got a couple of burning questions, one for you, Ryan, and one for you, Samir. So Ryan, you talked a lot about sort of this citizen developer and pro dev, and a lot of the pro devs that sort of are sort of used to writing plugins and JavaScript and so on are now coming back to me and saying, you know what, I haven't written a plugin for 2 years now. I can do all of that just by point and click and just by using this low-code platform. And I can see that sort of happening, and sort of picking on Eliza. It's like, going into a party and ordering a little bit of vegan food. Then everybody eats that vegan food and no one eats the meat.
What is going on, Robbie? Drag me in here.
I'm just making an analogy here. But, back in the days, I remember Chris Cognetta famously saying, in CRM 4.0 days, we used to know the product inside out. We used to even know the database and hack it and so on. Now it's so broad. There's so much that we can do with it. And this is a Power Platform and Dynamics conference. We're not even touching the Azure stuff that you integrate with, which is usually the case. So from your perspective, it's if someone is starting with this platform and they want to focus on something, what is probably the part that you're most excited about, and where you would sort of recommend people focus their attention?
Yeah. I don't know where you were going with the vegan thing, but as a committed carnivore, I've been really getting into Beyond Burgers. And I think somewhere there's an analogy there about folks with software expertise being very open-minded to low code and layers of abstraction. Like, I think, just to answer that part of it first, or address that part of it first, gosh, all we've been doing as software people for the last 40 years is adding layers of abstraction on top of low-level assembly code and binary. And in some ways, I think a lot of software people will look at low code from the outside and say, well, I don't need that. That's not for me. I know how to write code. Or I really want to be able to get in there and finely grain control every single aspect of every single resource group. At the same time, the whole point of really efficient software is to write as little code as necessary, which is sometimes a lot, but as little as necessary in order to really solve a problem. And if you kind of zoom way out from a Microsoft perspective, all we've been doing for the last 40 years is, on the one hand, making information workers more productive, on the other hand, making developers more productive. And the really exciting thing about low code is it's finally a chance to do both on one stack and really bridge the gap and bring them together. And that's how we think about it. Now, I think in that context, where I'm really excited and where we're putting a lot of our energy is actually that convergence of what a Fusion team can do together, and particularly what the whole platform can do together. We're putting a lot of energy into making Dataverse and the fusion of model and Canvas apps over Dataverse, really, really powerful. And I think we're really setting up for kind of the next evolution or renaissance in really lowering the complexity of making much more sophisticated things. And so for us, that convergence, what's represented today in Power Apps as the modern app designer and some of the features coming into it, as well as some of the AI behind it, watch that space, because there's a lot of cool stuff that's coming there pretty soon as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ryan. And just a quick question for Samir as well. And I think I've seen a sort of a comment in the chat from Praveen. And there's a lot of us today that are really excited about the Power Platform and what we can build with it. We are literally like kids in a candy store when we see some of those new features coming up. But the problem is that some organizations are risk adverse and they don't want to venture into the Power Platform. So what is your recommendation for the influencers in those organizations to go and talk to the decision makers and to sort of get them on board? What is the best way to sort of encourage the organizations to join the bandwagon?
Yeah, I think, the first thing that jumps to mind, you said, like, what should they do to talk to the decision makers? I would add, what can they do? So I would say a lot of the stories we've heard and seen is really about doing, right? So you're doing the talking at one level, but really in the meantime, just create the solution, right? You have that spreadsheet, go create it. If you can't create it because your organization has completely locked it down, go create in a demo tenant and take fake data that represents what your organization has. I think the thing that time and again, and even I keep asking, at least the people we meet, like, what would you say to someone? Either they've crossed that threshold, because that's what you raise in my mind is real. It's not a fake thing. There is that. If I think about, at some point in our history, we had to probably have a professional write a spreadsheet, and you had to submit something for someone else to build, something for you. And it's just, we're at some point in inflection that will continue on. So it's going back. All of the stories I hear, most of them were, hey, you know what? I went and did something, and then that snowballed, and they couldn't help but pay attention because it was of value, right? So, that's the first thing that jumps out. I think there's a lot more in terms of resourcing, sharing other examples. You got to find. And also the concerns are absolutely real, right? That's the other thing. It's not just someone, a 10-person shop goes and does something. It's very different than saying, now, therefore, my 150,000, 100,000 person organization can just go do that, because there are real data, especially on the data security and governance side. So I think the education just is both ways as well. It's also them being willing to go and learn about what is the environment they're in, and why is the particular InfoSec person in their organization, what are their concerns, and how can we best align in the Fusion collaborative way. It's not just a one-side story, would be my take. Maybe Ryan probably we could do a whole session just on this topic, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great session for a future conference, but I think you're spot on. There's no perfect way to start. There's just getting started. And that's the best advice we can give anybody.
Yeah, excellent, and that's thank you very much for that, because this is exactly what we're seeing, is that people start with one app, and then it goes out of proportion. Everybody starts using it, everybody loves it. Another business unit goes, oh, I want one of that as well. And then this is where the Center of Excellence, or Center of Enablement, as you call it, Samir, comes into the picture, and people start using it. Hey, Ryan and Samir, thank you very, very much for doing this for us. This is very exciting, and it set a great tone for the rest of the conference. As much as we would love to carry on asking you questions, other people are starting to join the other streams, so we have to sort of start moving in there and getting the speakers in there. As you said, it is content for an entire conference, just between sort of the MVPs and the keynotes and the community. So thank you very much for doing that. Thank you very much for everybody that joined the keynote. And we'll start the rest of the streams right away. Have a good day.
Thank you all.
Good to see you, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks.
all.